Alright, in this tutorial we're going to look at making the valid comparisons that you're often asked for after finding the standard deviation or the semi-interquartile range, the mean and the median. So I'm using data that I used in examples for the other tutorials, so I've already done the work, I already know which data values I'm going to compare. Here I'm just going to do a tutorial on writing the sentences. So the first one I've got is part B here. A group of student teachers had a mean of 21.5 and a standard deviation of 6. Make two valid comments to compare the study times of the two groups of students. So I have done the work for part A for this first group. So before we do them, I'm just going to write down that group 1, group 1, I'm just going to rewrite that, group 1. Now we calculated that their mean was 21.5. And the standard deviation we calculated as 4.4. And then group 2 is the one that we've been given in part B. This group had a mean of 21.5 and a standard deviation of 6. So when you're comparing the means, you always start with on average. So comparing the means here, 21.5 and 21.5, on average. So on average, we're talking about, you go back to the context, the number of hours spent studying. On average, both groups spend the same amount of time studying. And the reason that we know that is because as the means are the same. And that is the only bit, if you want to add a little extra just to explain why that is, that's the only bit that we should see the word mean. You shouldn't be saying on average the mean or anything similar to that. You're saying on average, and then you're telling me, like on average both groups spend the same amount of time studying, or you might have said, if it was different, it said on average group 1 spend more time studying, or on average group 2 spend more time studying. So you put it in context. You have to be able to take out as the means are the same, or comparing the word means out of the sentence and for it to still make sense. If anything, if you're not sure, just don't even include that last bit in your sentence, just leave that out. Just have on average, both groups spend the same amount of time studying. Alright, second part, comparing standard deviations. So standard deviations, we're talking about how far away it is from the mean. So the smaller the standard deviation, the more consistent it is. So here, our more consistent one is group 1. So group 1, and we're talking about the number of hours spent studying. So group 1 spend a more consistent number of hours studying. Group 1 spend a more consistent number of hours studying than group 2. You could leave it there, or you could say as the standard deviation is lower. So you're just putting the word consistent and then you're putting it into context, which one is more consistent. Okay, let's look at one of the other examples that we did before. So this one is talking about a runner had recorded her times in seconds for 6 different laps of a running track. She changes her running routine hoping to improve her consistency. After this change, she records her times for another 6 laps. The mean is 55 seconds and the standard deviation 3.2 seconds. Has the new training routine compared to her consistency? So actually, if it's saying this one now, consistency, we're only looking at the standard deviation. If you did want to write, let's just look at what we had before. So her mean time was 56.8 and the mean time here is 55 seconds. If you had wanted to write the sentence comparing this, you would say on average her time was shorter after the training routine as the mean was lower. We're just looking at consistency. This time the standard deviation has gone from 1.9 to 3.2 seconds. So actually, her training routine has not improved her consistency. As the standard deviation is higher with the new training routine. All right, let's look at the last one, which is the standard deviation. Sorry, not the standard deviation, the semi-interquartile range and the median. So we're going to use exactly the same sentences because median is another type of average and semi-interquartile range is another type of measure of consistency. So it's the same as before, we're just using slightly different statistics. This one says, calculate the median and the semi-interquartile range of the scores. So we did that in the tutorial that showed you how to do semi-interquartile range. So we have them here. In the second round, the median was 26 and the semi-interquartile range was 2.5. Make two valid comparisons between the scores in the first and second round. So let's just write down what we have. So round one, the median was 19.5 and the semi-interquartile range was 4.5. But in round two, our new ones are the median is 26 and the semi-interquartile range is 2.5. So we're talking about the scores in a dance competition, so just be sure that you know what the context is. So median, same as mean, we're going to say on average. On average. Then we look at the scores and decide which one's higher or lower. On average, the scores were higher in round two. And that there is all you need to write. You can, if you want, explain that you know as the median was higher. So you know why that you're saying on average, but it's not necessary. As long as you can take that bit out and it still makes sense. On average, the scores were higher in round two. That's you. Now we're looking at when the scores were more consistent. The scores were more consistent the scores were more consistent. And when were they more consistent? Well, when they were the least spread out. So again, actually, it's in round two. The scores were more consistent in round two. That's all you need for the sentence. You can write as the semi-interquartile range is lower. And that's you. So for median and mean, you're saying on average, and then you're talking about the amount. On average, the scores were higher. On average, there were more customers on Saturday or Sunday. On average, the amount of people at an event was higher here or there. And then for the standard deviation and the semi-interquartile range, you're saying these scores were more consistent, the number of people were more consistent, the number of hours was more consistent for group 1 or group 2, and that's because standard deviation or semi-interquartile range is lower. And that's you.